Hi, this is Ginger from In Sheep's Clothing Yarn Shop in Torrington, Connecticut, here to welcome you to another episode of Focus on Fiber. Today, I'm going to introduce you to crochet. We're going to learn how to make a chain and work some simple crochet stitches. Grab some yarn and join me. Okay, so crochet is pretty simple compared sometimes to, say, knitting, because you only need to use one crochet hook. Knitting, you need to have the two needles. All different types of crochet hooks. These are just a few that I grabbed out of my collection of crochet hooks. Your bigger hooks tend to be, so they're a little bit lighter weight, tend to be plastic. And then you've got your metal. And then I even found an old plastic crochet hook that in my collection. And then the smaller that you can get down to what they call steel hooks. And those are used for, like, if you're crocheting doilies, when you're using crochet cotton, which is a much finer yarn. And these other ones here are more for, like, you know, the heavier weight yarns. Now, as you're crocheting with different yarns, you will determine which crochet hook works best for that particular yarn. You can also, as you crochet, you kind of find which ones, like knitting needles, which ones are your favorite ones. I happen to have a brand that I like because of the style of the hook, the head of the hook that it has. It's a little bit flatter rather than some of them are a little rounder and kind of stick out a little bit more. And when I'm crocheting, I kind of find that I get that hook caught in my stitches, where with the flatter one, it tends to slide a little bit better. But that's me. Other people would probably love the other hook just as well. Another thing that you'll find with the crochet hooks is you have this little piece here that's a little flat, and that's where you can hold on to the hook for one thing. And then also what they do is they'll have the size printed on the hook there. Like this one, I can barely read it. It says what the brand is, but then it also says that it's a US size I hook, or also it's a 5.50 millimeter hook. So you have both those sizes on there, because some of your either older patterns will have that, the millimeters, or your European patterns will have that on there. So anyway, so to start out with, what I suggest is to get like a medium size hook, which would be like a size I, H, I, J. That's pretty good. And then a worsted weight yarn, which is like a number 4 yarn. Lots of times on the label it will specify that, or a worsted weight yarn, or a heavy worsted weight yarn. That's a good size to get started with. I also recommend trying to use like a smoother yarn rather than something that's going to have lots of bumps in it. And maybe, although a multicolor is kind of fun to work with, if it interferes with you seeing your stitches, sometimes it's better to go with just a solid color yarn. So that's what I would recommend. Now, what you do to get started with is you need to do a slip knot, and you need that for like when you're knitting too. And then all you do with a slip knot is you create a loop, and then with the yarn coming from the ball, you just place that underneath the loop like that, and then catch it with your hook, and then you pull both strands. Now, rather than tying on a knot onto your hook, this makes an adjustable knot, so that you can adjust it either tighter or looser as you need, rather than a knot that's going to stay in one size. So now once you have that, what you're going to do, and just leave a tail so you have something to hold on to. What you have to start out with first is you start with a chain, and that's your foundation for your crochet stitches to go into. Unlike knitting, where you're going to put on all your stitches onto one needle, and then you'll work into those open stitches or those loops. So what we're going to do is, and then the other thing is too, depending on how you hold your yarn, because what you want to do is you want to add some tension onto your yarn, because if you don't have any tension, it's very difficult to grab onto the yarn to pull it through. See, I'm keep losing my loop here because you want to get that loop to get into the hook so that you can pull it through your stitch. So some people wrap the yarn around their fingers. I don't do that. I just kind of, let's see, what do? I hold on to it between my fingers like this to get started with, and I wrap it around my hook, and then it goes between my two fingers like this, and this is how I hold my yarn when I knit too. I just kind of squeeze onto it, and then with my forefinger and my thumb, I hold on to the tail. Now when I do that, that gives me some tension so that I can grab that yarn that's coming from the ball. It goes into the crook of the hook, the hook here. And then what you want to do is you want to turn the hook and then pull it through that loop. So again, what I'm going to do now that I have the yarn between my fingers, I'm going to go underneath the yarn, and my forefinger and thumb will go up, securing the chain, catch the yarn, I turn it and I pull it through. Now the thing is, you want to make sure that you do this on the looser side, so you want to kind of pull up a little bit so that your hook is loose. If you do it super tight, when you go to pull it through, sometimes it's so tight you can't get it through that loop. So you want to just kind of pull up on the hook a little bit so it's loose around the hook. And now see, as my forefinger and my thumb are going up. Now instead of holding on to the yarn, my forefinger and my thumb are holding on to the actual chain. So I'm holding on to the chain, catching the yarn, turning, pulling it through. My hook goes up underneath the yarn. My fingers and my thumb automatically slide up, pinch, and then I pull the yarn through. And that one's a little snug. Okay? Through. And you just keep chaining like that. Now the other reason for having a looser chain too is that once we have the amount of stitches that we want for our chain, our hook has to go through that chain. So if we have a super tight chain, that hook is going to have a difficult time going through the chain. So you want to make sure that it's loose. You don't want it sloppy loose. And of course, practice makes perfect. As you go, you'll adjust your chain so that they are about the same size. And that takes practice to get that. It just becomes feel. It's like anything else. You just get good at it. So there's our chain. And I would just suggest that you just keep practicing. Now the nice thing about crochet is, like, say that you make a mistake, it's super easy to just pull it out. Put your hook back into one of the loops and then just start to chain again. And as you can see, you get kind of a nice little rhythm and you just kind of move along. So that's our chain. So now the first stitch that I would want to teach you is the single crochet. And you have your single crochets, you get your doubles, your trebles, and they're all based on the same wrapping the yarn around and basically doing a single crochet. So now when we go to do our single crochet, what we're going to do now is we're going to go and work back from the way that we came. Now our hook, we don't want to go back through the same chain that we came out of. So we're going to skip one and go into the next one. So what I do for the single crochet is I put my hook through the front in between the V of the chain. I go in, I go under my yarn, I turn my hook so I can pull it through the loop. So now I have two loops on my hook. I put the yarn over my hook again, and then now I pull it through both. So I've now completed a single crochet. So I'll go to the next crochet, the next stitch. I put my hook through the center, pull up a loop. Now I have two. put my hook underneath, wrap my yarn around the hook. And if you can see, my forefinger and my thumb are pinching and holding on to my chain so that I can very easily just pull my crochet hook through both. I go through, pull up a loop. And the other thing that I do too is I kind of pull it up so that it's the same height as the previous loop on my hook. I wrap around and I go through 2. This guarantees that I have not a super tight chain to go through. So I'm going to do this all the way across. Pull up a loop, wrap around. You can also see that this forefinger and thumb are pinching onto the tail, which help kind of push me along. Pull through. Up, wrap around, pull through. And you can see how my hand is kind of holding onto my chain. So like it's keeping my work nice and straight so I can see what's going on, and I can just, it holds it in place too, so that's not flapping around and I'm having a hard time getting my hook to go into the chain. It's giving me some tension to work against. So I go in, pull up a loop, around, go through both. Go in, pull up a loop, around, go through both. Loop, around, go through both. And we'll go to the end of the chain on here, round. Now crochet, for just the sake of crochet itself, is a wonderful thing to do. I also like to use crochet a lot because I do a lot of knitting. I like to use it for edgings on my knitting or a way to finish things off. Pull through. Crochet does tend to, I think, work a little faster too, because you're just working with those loops on your crochet hook. You don't have all those stitches on your needle. Now the biggest thing with crochet that most beginners have a real problem with is that when you crocheting and you're getting to the end, you want to make sure that you get to the absolute last stitch of that chain. So I'm looking here, I've got 2 more to, well, one's my slip knot. I have 1 more chain to go through, so I want to make sure I go through that, pick it up. Lots of times this is where people have a problem, where they don't go into the very last one. Like say they only go to here. So when they turn around and they go to work again, what happens is they miss that last one, and what happens is the work starts to go like this, and they start to get a triangle or some weird shape rather than a nice straight rectangle. So we want to make sure that we pay attention and go all the way to the end. So I'm going to go into that last chain. Okay, so now doing a single crochet, what we need to do is, because we want to turn our work around, okay? What we do is, I kind of think of it as like a step up so we can go around. We have to do 1 chain. When you do a single crochet, you chain 1, turn your work. Okay, so now we're ready to go into our work on the other side. So now what we're going to do, and you have some options here. What you can do is you can see that you have a nice little chain going across the top of your work. Now you can either go through just the back loop, and if you do that, it gives you a ridge. And what I'll do is I'll show you the difference here. So I'm going to just go through the very back loop, which was 1 leg of the V of that stitch. So I'm going to go into the back loop, pull up a loop, wrap around. I'm going to do my single crochet just like I was doing. Go through just that 1 back loop. So I'll do a few of those for you. And then you can see the difference between what I'll do now. Okay, so now what's going to happen is you're going to have this little ridge right here. See that little ridge? Okay. That's when you work through the back loop. So I'll just do a few more on the back loop. And sometimes your patterns will call for that because they specifically want you to have that ridge. Or maybe that's that's how you want to do it. Now, if you don't want the ridge, what you can do is take your hook and you go through both loops. You go underneath both of those legs, not just the one. Pull up your loop, go through both, go through both legs, pull up your loop. So let me do that going through. And you kind of have to, like when you push your hook in, you have to push it through and almost kind of downwards a little bit because your stitch is a little bit at an angle. If you go straight through, you're always going to get just the back loop. So now you're going to see our ridge right here? See how we have that ridge? No ridge. So that's the difference between working through the back loop or going through both loops. So you can decide which one you prefer. So I'll just finish up going through both loops. Now again, when we get through to the end, we want to make sure we get all the way to the end. So see, we have one more loop to go through. I mean, this one looks pretty obvious. Sometimes it's not quite so obvious looking once you get going. So there we go. And one way of telling whether you've gotten all the way there is, well, first of all, I mean, there's just nowhere else to go. There's no more stitches. But also, if you pull it straight up, you're going to say see that you have a nice straight edge. And that's what you're aiming for. You don't want it to be going in, you don't want it to be going out. The only way that you can, it's easier to lose stitches than it is to gain. And the only way that you would gain is if you accidentally did two in the same stitch. Okay, so now we're at the end and we want to turn around and come back. So what do we want to do? We want to step up. So we're going to chain one, turn our work, and now we'll go through the next side. So this time we'll just do a plain single crochet going through all the way across. So we're going through both. Now, by keeping our crochet not too tight, the holes are nice and easy to go through. You can see them. Just go through both. So this is single crochet, and this gives you a nice firm piece of work. If you want something a little more open, that we need to change our stitch. This stitch is really good for like baby blankets, toys, because the hole is much smaller. Like if you're putting stuffing in, it doesn't come out as easily, like say if you were doing a double crochet. Also, if you wanted to even tighter piece of work, then you can maybe go down a crochet hook. Like right now, you know, this is nice. It has some flexibility to it. It still has some body, but it's not super, super firm. If I wanted it firmer, then I would maybe go down to like this H hook right here. Now you can also get into really fancy hooks too. I have some really pretty wood hooks. But some of those to me, they're pretty, they're fancy, but I always go to my good old trusty aluminum hook that I can work very quickly with. Okay, so again, we want to make sure we get into that last stitch. So I'm going into that very last stitch. Trying to get through both legs. There we go. Pull up my loop, pull it through. And again, see how we have a nice straight edge here. It's not going in, it's nice and straight. Okay, so I think we've got the single crochet down pretty well. How about we try a double crochet? Now double crochet, all you have to do, again, we still have to do our step up and turn, but because double crochet is a taller stitch, we have to do a couple more stitches. So we're going to chain two, turn our work. Now, for double crochet, what makes it different is, because we won't need to make it taller, that means we have to have more loops going on with our hook. So what we're going to do, instead of putting our crochet hook right in, we're going to wrap the yarn around our hook one time. Then we're going to go into the hole, pull up a loop. Now I have 3 loops on my hook. We're going to wrap around the hook once. Now, instead of going through all the stitches, or even one of the stitches, what we're going to do is we're going to go through 2, leaving 2 on the hook. Wrap around and go through the remaining 2. So again, what we're going to do is wrap around our hook, insert the hook through the stitch, pull up a loop. There's 3 on there. Wrap around again. So now we have 4 loops on our hook. We're going to pull through 2, wrap around, pull through 2. So wrap around, insert the hook, pull up a loop, wrap around, pull through 2, pull through 2. And I just kind of think in my head it's double, so 2, 2, 2. Now you can see it's giving you a taller stitch and a more open stitch. So wrap around, go through, pull up. You get yourself into a real kind of like little, kind of sing yourself a little song as you go along to kind of keep yourself wrap around, insert, pull up, wrap around, 2, wrap around, 2. Go through, pull up, wrap around, go through 2, wrap around, go through 2. It's very rhythmic, and I think that's what helps make crochet go so quickly, is because you do get into this rhythm. And there's also, there's also this smoothness that happens of pulling, drawing that hook through the loops, wrapping around. Everything's nice and smooth and just moves along really easily. There we go, wrap around, through, and we're going to go all the way across. Let's see if we can go through 2 of these. There we go. And you'll see quite the difference when we get to the end of how much taller, how much open this stitch is compared to the single crochet. Now, double crochet is quite often used for when they're doing granny squares, so this is a very handy stitch to know. And there's also the half double crochet, I just realized too. That's another popular one too. Wrap around. Okay, so we're going through the very last one. Pull up, pull through, pull through. So as you can see, we have a nice even edge there. And then you can also see how it's much taller, the stitches, and much more open. You can really see that compared to the single crochet underneath. So now, if we want to turn around again, we want to step up, so we're going to go 1, 2, turn our work, and again, wrap around, go through, pull up a loop, wrap around, 2, wrap around, 2. Wrap around and go through both. And it just becomes second nature as you're doing this. So you can really see how you can get quite a head of steam up as you're doing this, and really, I'm trying very, very hard not to go super fast for you, because I could really just move right along right now. It's just so fast to be able to do this. Now it is a stiffer piece of fabric, so crochet. That's why crochet is so great for like pillows and blankets and toys. Clothing, you can certainly do clothing with it too, but you again want to, quite often what people are doing now is using a little bit finer yarn, a little bit bigger hook to give yourself a little bit more of a fabric that's a little bit drapier. But here we go all the way to the end. And the other thing about crochet too is once you've done your piece, unlike knitting where you have to bind off, your piece is actually finished. Like when I get to the end of this, if I cut my yarn and draw it through, I can be done with this piece. Of course, I can always add an edging or something like that if I want to it, but I don't have to bind off because all my stitches are already, you're only dealing with a loop or loops on your hook. See, I have that one loop on the hook. So when I get to the very end, I want to again make sure I get through that last stitch. And there we go again. This is so important because guaranteed once you start crocheting, you're going to start realizing, like, if you're not totally, you know, haven't gotten to that very last stitch, you will start to see that little V happening. All right, so say that I'm done with this piece now. This is the other thing, is like, say that you're setting your crochet aside, just pull up the loop nice and big. There you go. You can go back to it, make it a little bit smaller. But so like right now, I'll cut my piece. And now what I just want to do is I'm going to draw that little tail through the loop, pull on it. There we go, done. And there's your little piece of crochet. Perfect. So now all you need to do, get some yarn, get some hooks, do a little practicing, and you will be crocheting like crazy. So there you go. And it wasn't so hard, was it? And with some more practice, you will be crocheting up a storm. Thank you again for joining me. And please remember, keep a focus on fiber. See you the next time.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.